Hey, this is Anna Bevan Gravely with NC Free, and just to change up from our regular candidate interviews and business interviews, have the pleasure of talking to Damon Circosta, who's chair of the State Board of Elections today, to really answer some questions that I have about the new elections law, and I'm sure that there'll be some additional questions that come from this conversation. All good conversations lead to more conversations, so thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's a pleasure to do this, Anna. Hopefully I can provide some clarity on what's going on in elections in North Carolina.
Awesome. So on Friday, June 12th, the governor signed House Bill 1169, Bipartisan Elections Act of 2020, into law. As the bill states, it got bipartisan support as it moved through the General Assembly. And so what this bill seeks to do is expand absentee voting, as well as address some in-person voting safety. What else does this law do?
Well, one of the things that was really pleasing for me to see is in these contentious times, and certainly around election issues, rarely are you able to get bipartisan consensus. And the Board of Elections and our executive director, Karen Brinson Bell, put forth some common sense, practical ways in which we can deal with the challenges that COVID-19 presents when it comes to elections. And lo and behold, it was bought into by both parties, which is something you don't see. So I was very enthusiastic that it passed the way it passed, very excited that the governor signed it. And really it does three things. One, it makes absentee vote by mail easier and more secure. Two, it provides some matching money that lets us draw down federal dollars to shore up our election apparatus. And then three, it makes sure that we have the PPE and the right materials and the right way in which to go about in-person voting. So here in North Carolina, our goal is not to tell you how to vote, and it's not to tell you which method you use to vote. We have three methods available. We can vote in person. For a long time, we've had no excuse absentee vote by mail, and you can do that as well. Or you can take advantage of our early voting process. And so some states have struggled with, do we go all mail or do we go all in person? And it's really been our view that the more options we can give voters, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think leaving the door open for as many ways for people to be able to vote is going to be great. And so you mentioned a little bit earlier about making it a little bit easier to vote absentee. What does that look like? Because I know a lot of voters, that's new for a lot of people. Most people vote in person. So what does that mean?
And you're right about that. Historically, we see roughly about 5% of our voters take advantage of our absentee vote by mail. We're going to see an increase. Now, people have guessed how big that increase is going to be, and I think a lot of that will depend on where we are with the virus and our response come November. But we are anticipating anywhere up to 40% of our voters taking advantage of absentee vote by mail. The process is relatively straightforward. What you need to do is request an absentee vote by mail ballot. We will not be sending loose ballots to anyone. You need to request it. Once you request that ballot, you fill out the ballot just like you would if you were in an election precinct. You get somebody else to witness the outside container envelope, so they won't see how you vote, but they will attest to the fact that you are the person voting. And you send it back in. What we did in this bill is we made that process easier. First, we will have a online portal. So anybody can go online. We're still setting it up. We have to have it set up here very soon, so we're working overtime to get it done. And you can request your absentee ballot that way. Second thing we did is we lessened the signature requirement. Prior to this, you needed two different folks to two different adults to authorize and sign your ballot, and now we need one. There's been arguments that creates a security loophole. I would disagree. I think it actually makes it more secure. One of the issues we had with absentee vote by mail in the past was too many people were involved in your ballot. The fewer the better. And that's also why the portal is a good thing. It'll make it much more secure because we'll be able to track where these ballots are going and how they come back. So our absentee mail-in ballot process will be much easier, much more streamlined, and much more secure. And we are going to have to make sure that there's a lot of labor that goes into making sure that those are counted accurately. And so we're trying to tell people that we're going to get the count right, but we might not get it as fast as we have in years before. People are used to going to bed election night and knowing who won, and we're going to have so much more work to do that it might take us a little bit longer. So we're going to ask for the public's patience as we make sure that we accurately count their vote.
Yeah, I think North Carolina is used to some bizarre things happening around election day. So I think the grace of from the people of North Carolina will be there to provide additional information and accuracy.
I do too, and we make sure that we make sure that that process is open to the public. You can come down and see how it's done. We want to make sure that nobody has any questions, because regardless of whether or not you're a Republican or a Democrat, or you vote conservative or progressive, everybody wants to make sure we get it right. And that's our job at the Board of Elections, is just to make sure that when the vote is counted, it's counted accurately. Sometimes that takes a little bit more time, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we got it exactly right.
Yeah, yeah. So early voting is scheduled to start on the 15th of October. Will this law impact early voting schedules?
It does not impact our early voting schedule whatsoever. The way that process works is that county boards of elections, with some guide rails, set how their early voting will be done and where. And then if county boards can't reach unanimity, they can ship it up to us at the State Board of Elections, and we'll make the decision. And that process will be the same as it has always been. We do have some challenges ahead of us. We don't know what the virus is going to be like. And so we have to be aware and ready and making sure that we can do everything we can to get votes in. Early voting's been great because it takes a lot of pressure off of election day. And the more votes we can get early via absentee vote by mail or early voting, the less pressure there will be if something unforeseen happens on election day.
Yeah.
So we're really hopeful that people will take advantage of absentee vote by mail or their early voting to make sure that we have as many votes counted as we possibly can, given all the uncertainty around COVID-19.
Absolutely. And so in dealing with in-person voting, a majority of the counties vote with paper ballot, but a minority of them vote by touchscreen. Is there a preferred method? What are your thoughts on them?
Well, I would quibble with you a little bit. What we did this year is we made sure that everybody in North Carolina will vote with a paper ballot. Now, that paper ballot can be marked in two different ways. One, with the old Scantron bubbles that we all remember from high school, or two, with something called a BMD, or a ballot marking device, and that's your touch screen. Regardless of whether or not you use a touch screen to mark your ballot, or you use the Scantron to mark your ballot, depending on which county you are in or what type of voter you're in. Some voters with disabilities use the touch screen even in those Scantron counties to make sure that they have access to the vote. Regardless of which way you end up voting on which apparatus, you'll have a paper ballot, and then that paper ballot will be what we have in case we need to audit or verify what goes on. I don't really think that there's a preferred method. Both have pros and cons. There was a bit of controversy when I first came on the board about how exactly to go about this. I think the more important thing for North Carolina is that we do what the voters need us to do to make sure that they can access the ballot. Some counties prefer the touch screens, other counties prefer the paper ballots, and our job is just to make sure that regardless of which county you live in, we count your vote accurately.
So with switching back to absentee voting, I feel like there's just so much for us to talk about here. A recent Civitas poll said that 14% of people intend to vote by mail, and you're estimating that it's going to be somewhere around 40%, if I recall correctly.
We're estimating, but I mean, it's anybody's guess. There's so many variables going in with COVID. Whether or not it's 14%, as the folks over at the Civitas poll say now, or 5% historically, or 40%, we just got to be ready for whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. And do you feel like this law does prep you for that? It gives you the tools you need to be able to make it.
Yes, I think that a couple things happened with this law that were very beneficial to us. One, the bipartisan nature of it. I was very pleased to see both Republicans and Democrats come together to pass some common sense legislation. Two, we're in a hurry, and time is not on our side. You never wish a pandemic, obviously, and the timing of it couldn't be worse for elections. But we have more time than some others. We were lucky that we were one of those states that got our primary done beforehand, with the exception we have one primary coming up next week, June 23rd, for a runoff in the Congressional District 11. But for the most part, we got our primary out of the way. So we've got a little bit of time now to build the tools that we need in order to make sure this works. We don't have a moment to spare. Election administrators have to do a ton of work that the voters don't see to make sure everything goes exactly right. In some ways, it's like building a Fortune 500 company in a matter of weeks and then doing it again every couple of years. So we're enthusiastic that they were able to pass this legislation now as opposed to July or August. And we're glad that it was bipartisan. So it will help us get it done here at the North Carolina State Board of Elections.
Yeah. And going back to the possible round 2 of COVID-19, that continues to be a really strong rumor that people are almost breathing into life because we're talking about it so much. But with that coming and happening again, potentially, do you see there being a huge education on voting more by mail, as to help people feel like their vote still matters and their vote still counts, but to really help them feel like reduce the fear around it?
I think we live in uncertain times, and there's fear on just about every level about about everything. I think the best way we can ameliorate that fear at the Board of Elections is just to show people what we're doing. Yes, most people vote in person in North Carolina historically. 95% of us go, either using early voting or on election day, go to vote in person. And so if we're going to have a situation where many people are voting by mail for the first time, we have to do a lot of education. We have to be letting them know exactly what happens to their ballot. We have to be over communicating with the public about this process. Elections are something that most people don't think about every single day, right? It comes up every couple of years, and people go and make their voice heard. Here in the election administration world, we think about it every single day. And sometimes when you're so in the middle of it, you forget that the general public doesn't know all these details. And so our job here at the Board of Elections is to talk people through exactly how the process is going to go, talk people through what's different from last time, and just make sure that they understand that our first job, our only job, is to make sure that your vote counts. And so we're just going to continue to do that work.
Yeah, awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the NC Free membership about the work that you guys are doing?
The last thing I say in all these interviews, Anna, is our job is to set the table. The voters' job is to make their voice heard. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that your preferred method of voting is easy and secure and accessible. And it's up to everybody in this state to go out and vote. And if we do that, the democracy reigns supreme. We're all doing okay.
Awesome. And last question, for more updates on how this law changes or affects voters in this education plan, where can we go to learn more?
The best spot to go for election information is your trusted election sources. I'll put the first one up there, which is our website, www.ncsve.gov. And that's where you can go learn all about what's going on with elections and how we're going to make sure that vote counts.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope that you have a great rest of the day.
You do the same, Anna. Thank you.
Bye.